So I just met this is Philip Doy from HMD Research.
Yeah.
And so you run a company on.
Yeah, so my company looks at human-machine dialogue. We kind of specialize in user-side evaluation, so looking at people's perceptions and how to measure those in validated ways of speech interfaces effectively.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. What's an example? What are three examples of human machine dialogues that, like, I might interact with? Do you mean like I go to a website and I start asking questions, or?
Yeah, so it could include things that. So most of the work I do is with like voice-first systems. So they tend not to be multimodal, like
Sure.
the likes of like smart speaker devices, so Alexa and kind of Google Assistant. But also work with kind of systems that are built for customer service roles as well. So like kind of really constrained kind of practices, which is actually quite interesting because you can really play around when there's not too much noise going on in the background.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna ask some questions because I want to make sure people understand, like anyone on YouTube. So when you say multimodal, you mean, for example, different modalities, like you mean text and voice, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the studies we did, we looked at how non-native speakers were using things like Siri, and one of the things we noted was like the increased kind of cognitive load and how that can actually be improved if there was something like a screen just to give some kind of confirmation back to the viewer, the person using the system. Because in a voice-first scenario, that kind of
Sorry, voice first. I'm just explaining. Correct me if I'm wrong.
yeah,
Is when
so-
like you just talk, like Alexa, or you call on a phone. It's like
Yes.
American Airlines, book your.
Yeah. So I mean, smart speakers have some back channeling with little lights, but it's very little, and most people don't always recognise that as back channeling. So
And when you say
have-
back channel, you mean like information about what's been happening.
Exactly.
Or like
when we
information comes
talk
back to the
when we
user.
talk to each other as humans, we'll kind of use hand gestures, facial gestures, just to make confirmations, little noises like
Interesting,
I
which you'll see.
understand. And it doesn't interrupt the flow of the dialogue. But you can't do that with a speech interface. Because
Yes.
the
A
way the
speech only interface.
Yeah, because
Okay.
of the way the speakers are set up, and there's no other channels for actually communicating this kind of additional information. So we kind of we look at like how, I'm trying to, where do you go from that? So
No, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
If it's okay, I'm actually gonna ask a question to the audience and like give them 10 seconds to think. So everyone, if you listen to this now, like what did you take away from this? Like what was interesting? And like what's like a next step? Like what would you do differently as a result of this knowledge? Would you Google, voice first interfaces? Would you kind of take a look at Alexa and wonder why it's not done differently? Like what would you all do differently? So from a learning perspective, I like to prompt people so that they kind of think
sure
about it.
thing, yeah.
And I just want to add something super interesting. Here's someone who, just gave an incredibly well articulated analysis of interaction between humans and the machines and dialogues.
Thank you.
And he runs a company and he does PhD at University College Dublin with Ben Cowan.
Ben Cowan, yeah.
BNCOWAN. So you might Google that research, and also Google someone called Gavin Doherty, GAVIN DOHERTY.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of HCI at that university.
Yeah.
But tell us, what were you doing before this? Well, you finished your PhD a year ago and you started a company.
so
what were you doing before
I
this? How did you get into
finished my
this?
PhD just 1 year ago. I did an undergrad in psychology before that. But before that, I was a carpenter for 20 years. So, 2008 saw a lot of turmoil for a lot of people, big economic crash. The building industry was decimated. So, rather than kind of sit on my laurels, I got up, dusted myself off, try something new.
And do you mind if I ask how old you were?
So how old was I? I was 36 when I started my
So in
undergrad.
2008, you were carpenter at 36, and
Yeah.
you had the financial crash, and then you were like, everything was decimated. So you're 36, like, I'm going to get an undergrad. And
Yeah.
had you done an undergrad before?
Yeah, no.
Was
never
your first
done-
undergrad?
Yeah. All my friends went to college when I was younger. Unfortunately, we couldn't really afford it in our family, so it wasn't an option for me. So that's how I ended up on building sites. But
Interesting.
yeah, life has a way of bringing you back around.
Where
again,
did you
doesn't
grow
it?
up?
So I grew up in the UK, on the south coast, a place called
Okay.
Basingstoke. It's quite close to Reading, Bournemouth, not too far from
Interesting.
London.
And I thought the
but I was
UK
actually Irish, born in Ireland. So
Okay.
once I turned about 20, I moved back to Ireland on my own, and I've been there ever since. So.
And if you don't mind me asking, I thought the UK had free education or subsidized education.
I'm not too sure how it works in the UK, but no, not at undergrad level. I think there's a system of loans and things like that. But
Interesting.
yeah.
So when you were thinking of applying to university, you
And-
might have
and
had
it wasn't just the funding of the college as well. Like it was
Yeah.
a family situation. We needed money into the house. We needed more
Interesting.
wages. I grew up in a single parent family and things like that. So it's just as dealing with life, you have to deal with what comes your way.
So when you finish like upper six, form six, you were just like became a carpenter.
Yeah, well, I wasn't a particularly good student as a kid, I will admit, and I actually failed all of my GCSEs.
GCSEs, O levels, just so they know.
Yeah,
Think of Harry Potter schooling in the UK and also in Trinidad, where I'm from. I'm just explaining to them. It's like grade 11 or something, but you
Right.
stick to an exam. So you didn't get good GCSEs.
No, I didn't do
Interesting.
very well. I mean, I had an apprenticeship arranged before I even did my exams, so I kind of.
So when you were like in grade 9 or 10, you're 13, 14, you're like, I'm not doing well in school, let me get an apprenticeship as a carpenter.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so then you weren't getting good grades, so you're like, I became a carpenter like 15 or 16.
Yes. Yeah.
And
yeah.
you
So
worked
it was
until...
a week before I turned 16. I started my apprenticeship.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And do you mind if I ask you what you feel comfortable sharing this with the internet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just stop me at any
Yeah,
point,
no
or we don't
problem.
have to post this. What were your GCSEs? If you remember, you did like 8 of them or 6 of them.
I did 7, I think. Just the main ones, kind of English, English,
Oh,
French,
what-
history, and then a couple of design and woodwork classes.
And what were your grades in them, if you even remember?
E.
E. So there's A, B, C, D, E. And I think from a,
Across the board.
what's a fail? Is a D a fail?
I think technically F is a fail.
Okay.
E is kind of a grade, but anything below a D is not really.
Oh, so it's a pass, but it's like a low
Yeah,
grade. For example,
yeah.
you couldn't get, but it'd been hard to get into
It
sixth
wouldn't
form.
have got me into any colleges or sixth forms or anything.
So the way it works is you sit external exams, then you have to go into sixth form, grade 12 and 13, by passing those, right? So,
Yeah.
and I only ask this so people have context, because here's someone who actually got a bunch of E's, and you couldn't get in sixth form,
Yeah.
and you couldn't go to university, you became carpenter, and then in 2008, you're like, okay, things are crashing, you're like, I'm gonna go back to undergrad. What made you decide,
Yeah.
or how did you feel? You weren't worried about you wouldn't do well? Or
I
you-
was very nervous. I was very lucky to do an access program, and they kind of gave us some guidance.
What's an
on-
access program?
It's just like you do a year where you pick like one module from different courses. You try out a few different things. Like I did a module from law and a module from English literature, a module from psychology, and so on. And you do 1 year of that, and they just kind of prepare you for doing your undergrad degree.
You do sixth form modules.
Kind of, yeah.
So it's an access program run by the UK government or non-profit?
No, this was in Ireland. In
Ireland.
Dublin,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
So you were nervous at first, but you're like, let me try this because you were motivated enough. You wanted to like, I guess you couldn't work. So you're like, let me do something.
I mean, at the time, because I was self-employed previously, I wasn't entitled to any social welfare benefits. So the only way I could get social welfare benefits after the crash, when there was no work, was if I actually went to college. And
Interesting.
it was something I actually always kind of wanted to do. So it was like silver lining. Go grab it.
Interesting. Okay, so you did you got better grades this time around in
Yeah,
sixth form.
absolutely. I went and I did a TSM, so a 2-subject moderatorship. I studied psychology and English literature, majored in psychology, and I came out with a very high 2-1, first in my final year project. And
What does 2-1 mean? Is that like a grade of 1? And
So a first is like the highest grade you can
Yeah.
get, and 2-1 is the next one down.
okay, because
So
okay.
anything over 70% is a first.
So let's think of a first as an A or A plus.
Yes,
And then 2-1
yeah.
is like an A.
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
cool.
So a first would be an A or an A plus, and 2-1 is an A minus or a B plus. So
Nice, cool.
yeah,
So and then you applied to university undergrad.
yeah. Well, that was my undergrad. So that's
Oh,
what
so
I did
okay,
in
okay.
my
You
my
did sixth
undergrads,
form,
Yeah,
and then you
yeah.
did, okay, so you did well. Okay, got you. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah, I was really into kind of cognitive neuroscience, but
Interesting.
unfortunately, because of my age and getting in, like the career trajectory really at that time looked like it was academia only, and there's quite a long wait to get a kind of a good, well-paying job in
Yes.
that kind of a field. So I took a little bit of time out, took 1 year out, went back. I was working as a delivery driver in a posh supermarket, and just had a little think about how I could use some of the kind of techniques that they use like the behavioural experiments, the kind of stuff I really enjoyed, and where else I might be able to use that. with
Use
some
them in
practical
delivery?
utility. And I came across HCI, and I thought,
and HCI, what's HCI if you have to tell people?
so human-computer interaction. So,
What is it?
so it's just that kind of the study about how people interact with computers. It's a very mixed kind of discipline with lots of people from all sorts of areas. So I suppose the way I look at it is interaction always has a psychological component because we think about the things that we do before we do them. So it just seemed like an ideal resting place for me and my interests, you know. So yeah, and then I sent an email to Benjamin Cowan, kind of told him all about my interests in neuroscience and statistics and like technology and society, and we met for a coffee, and that was it. He took
And you
me
did your
on.
PhD?
Yeah, and
That's
absolutely
incredible.
flew for it. And it was the time of my life, I swear.
Wow. And so then afterwards, you're like, I'm gonna start a company.
Yeah, well, as it was coming towards the end of my, okay, no, I have to be a little bit careful about what I say here.
I can pause if you want to.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
No, carry on, carry
okay.
on. So, yeah, as I was coming towards the end of my PhD, I was very lucky. I'd had a bit of contact from someone in industry that were kind of interested in the work I was doing, and it just happened that a role came available as I was finishing, and
Yes.
I was very lucky. I literally just walked out of my PhD and straight into this. I actually started the role a month before my Viva.
Viva.
So Viva Voice is like your examination at
Well,
the end. So you write your thesis
defense, I
and then
guess.
You do, yeah,
Okay,
it's thesis defense. Yeah, so you sit there and do a presentation
Gotcha.
with an internal and an external examiner, and they
Nice. And then after that, so that's the company you're in now.
No, so I worked. I was again back to
Yeah.
being self-employed as I was as a builder.
Well, so you worked in another company for a year
Yeah,
or
so I
two.
worked as a self-employed contractor for a little while, and I kind of technically still am because I'm in the process of turning my company into a limited company. So we're kind of just on the
Interesting.
So
Wow.
I've 1 year experience in that, and it's gone absolutely brilliantly.
It's financially, it's viable.
Financially, it's very good, I have to say.
That's incredible. I mean, it's an incredible story. So I mean, and I think just thinking where you started and like where you're ending up, and you explained a lot of those concepts. Like some people would argue they prefer your explanation of those concepts than mine, and I'm a professor teaching human computer interaction.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, what do you think you would say to people? Like, if I were to tell people, what do you take? I'll tell people, and you say yours. So if people listen to this, what are your takeaways from this? What do you all take away from this video? And like, what are the next steps? What would you all do differently as a result of this? Like, who would you share this with? What messages would you send to someone? What would you keep your eye out for? What decisions would you make differently in life? Or what decisions would you encourage other people to make differently? So I'll give them 10 seconds to think, then maybe you can share yours as we close.
Yeah.
Let me give them 10 seconds to think.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think about decisions I'd make differently.
If you don't mind, can I give the people listening 10 seconds?
Oh, yes.
Because then they sometimes reflect, and then you can like share yours. No, I apologize. So everyone, what would you do differently as a result of hearing this? What decisions would you make differently? Or what decisions would you encourage other people to make differently? What messages would you send to people to kind of share? That uncomfortable silence and make sure you'll actually think about it. And now, please share yours.
So I suppose my message from life is really sometimes life gives you lemons and you just make lemonade. Life is full of challenges. It throws obstacles in your way, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it. It's outside of your control. And it's like the old saying, it's like having the what's the word? I've forgotten the phrase now.
Right.
It's the knowledge to know what you can and can't control, and the wisdom to.
Wait, I think it's the people call it the serenity prayer or something. Give me the resilient. Well, give me the resilience
the resilience
to accept
cope with the
what I
things
can't change.
control, and
The courage to
do with
tackle
the
those I
things
can,
I can,
and there wasn't really difference. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. And I mean, and if this is great, like it's an incredible story. I wonder, is there something we could say to people very specifically, like, because this is a great lesson, but I think as a learning researcher, if I listen to this, I would be like, oh, cool, but I want to think of what I do differently. So like, what are 3 things, for example, an undergrad student, right, who's graduating right now, I'm trying to imagine how this would make a difference in their trajectory. They're going this way and they might do it differently.
Yeah.
Someone who's, working right now, let's say they're not employed at the moment, right? And they feel like, oh yeah, I can't go and get an undergrad, or I don't even think an undergrad PhD is the best approach, but they think I'm in an institution, I can't do X, right? So maybe that's it. They're like, I can't get a job in this area. I can't switch what I'm doing. Or maybe someone else who's thinking like, I'm doing what I'm doing. Maybe even I'm doing my job. Maybe I should do something differently. So I'm trying to think of something very concrete for these people, like, because we can tell them like, you can do it, but that won't ring as true as like, there were nuggets in your story that were a lot more precise. So what would it be? Would it be like, when you think you can't do something, do a small experiment to figure out if you can? What would you say to them that they could do right now,
I would just say reach out anyway. Try. Always ask a question. There's nothing wrong with reaching out, sending someone an email and just asking the question. It's better to know than to not know, and be kind of living in ambiguity about whether you can or you can't without trialing it out.
I think that's really good. So someone might say, I don't think I can switch careers, so they don't. Or they think I shouldn't ask them. What you're saying is they could say, why don't you ask someone in the career and say, if I was wondering if I could switch your career, maybe I'm totally off,
Yes.
How would that look like?
Exactly.
Is that what you would do?
Absolutely, yeah. Reach out, ask a question. Find someone who knows about the things that you want, who's already where you want to be, and ask them a question. most people are absolutely delighted to tell you where they came from and where they've been, as I am right now.
Yes.
So just
Ask
reach
someone.
out, ask someone.
No, I like that a lot. And I guess one thing I might add to that is people might feel weird to do it, or might feel like judgments and so on. Maybe actually another way is like ask on Reddit, where you
Yeah,
can be
yeah,
anonymous and you can just
absolutely.
ask and
Yeah.
say like, tell people the situation, and then no one will know who you are, and you can just put it up.
Absolutely, there's so many avenues that you could use nowadays.
Use technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I guess the one thing I might share on top of that is I wouldn't ask one person. There's a great quote that like, I think like different authors, right? You can be rejected 20 times, you only need one person to accept you. You can have your startup funding rejected 50 times, you only need one person. And with us, you can submit your paper many times, only need one acceptance. So I would suggest people like reach out until they get one positive response. You don't have to change your
Yeah,
career or
yeah,
do the thing you can't,
absolutely,
but reach out until you get
absolutely.
one, and then you can stop.
Absolutely. I mean, I think
Post on Reddit, post 5 times, 10 times to get one positive response. Ask 20 people to get one positive, and then you can stop.
Yeah,
That's
I
the end of
mean,
the experiment.
I mean, so another slight little story there on that. So I have 3 award-winning papers now at this stage, and every single one of those was
So
rejected.
Google Philip Doyle, and you
Every
can see his
single
face.
one of those was rejected at some point. And rejection is part of the process, and my life has been like that too.
Yeah.
But you have to pick yourself up. You have to find strength and just carry on, because that's just today. Tomorrow's another day.
I have to say, honestly, Philip, your story is super inspiring to me. Like, honestly, like, it's moving. Like, if I think about that, like, the things you've gone through, I haven't had to go through. Like, it's like, I think it makes a lot of people tear up and think about it. So thanks so much for sharing.
You're very welcome. I'm very happy to talk to you, and good luck. Good
Thank
luck.
you. And everyone, hashtag takeaways. What do you take away from this? Hashtag next steps. Don't let this just be feel good. Let this be something that makes a difference in the world. Share this with someone and think of something you can do differently. Use this. Don't let it be in one way out the other.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Philip.
No, you're very, very welcome. It's lovely to meet you, by the way.
Yeah, it's great to
actually.
meet you.
Okay.
I'll get your email now, actually. If
Yeah,
it's okay.
yeah, yeah.